All right, good morning, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you to this installment of dot.LA Convenes, our speaker series devoted to empowering women in tech. I'm Kelly O'Grady, dot.LA's chief host and correspondent and head of video. So a little bit about this, when we were thinking about the types of events we wanted to put on, we naturally kept coming back to our mission. So it's no surprise that LA has seen the development of a really vibrant tech and startup ecosystem across a number of industries, and that's where we come in at dot.LA. So for those of you that don't know, we are a media company and an events company with a mission of shining a light on the innovation in this very quickly growing community. So events such as today's are just one part of doing that, even in the virtual world, which we all operate in. So when we first came up with dot.LA Convenes, we were really inspired by the incredible women creating an impact in our community, but also acutely aware of the unique challenges women in the space face. So our aim with this event series in particular is to create a safe space to have really honest conversations, build connections with women in these underrepresented industries, and through that, empower the women in the LA tech and media community. So I've personally been really passionate about this due to my professional and personal background. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation today. A few of the boring logistics to get out of the way before we jump into the protein. So all attendees are going to be muted for the duration of the event. You'll have the speakers up on video in front of you throughout the discussion. And I really want to stress this. Our aim is to make this a two-way discussion. It's always the best when we get questions from you, our viewers. So we want to hear from you. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see an icon for Q&A, raise hand, and the chat function. So please feel free to submit any questions or themes you have in the Q&A section. We will absolutely make sure we get to them over the course of our discussion. And finally, a recording of the event is going to be posted on the dot.LA website by the end of the day. So if you want to share it with folks that weren't able to attend, you can. All right, so that's out of the way. Let's get to it. The theme for our discussion today is building confidence in a virtual world. So what are we going to talk about? Many women face challenges when it comes to self-assurance and self-censorship in the workplace. And this has only been made more difficult by the obstacles the pandemic has raised when it comes to financial security and working from home. So to that end, I have three very impressive women with me today. And I first just want to take a beat to thank Pledge LA for helping us source some of these speakers for today's event. So first we have Audra Gold, the co-founder and CEO of Vurbl Media. Sharon Winter, COO and co-founder of Esports One, is also here with us. And Victoria Tinsley, head of partnerships at Valence, is going to round out our group. So how we're going to run this is I'm first going to give each of you ladies the virtual floor, if you will, to introduce yourselves, talk a bit about what you do, and then we're going to jump into discussion around some key themes to get us going. So like I said, audience, anything that piques your interest, throw those comments in the Q&A section and we will be sure to get to it. So Audra, do you want to start us off?
Sure, thanks. And thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate being invited to this panel with these other amazing women. So great honor to be here. Thank you very much. So I'm Audra Gold, as Kelly said, and I am recently have founded Vurbl Media with a great team of people I've worked with for years. What brought me here is 20 years of basically building products online in the media space and some in the gaming space, but in a product management capacity. And then I went on to head a product at several early stage and some later stage companies, and have founded a company a couple years ago, and we recently transitioned into this new company, Vurbl. So Vurbl is essentially we're building a platform that will be the YouTube of audio. So you can imagine UGC audio of all types, focused on spoken word. We're steering away from music, but we're in the process of building very rapidly. We do have a website up that has some editorial content around audio and podcasting and things like that, but we plan to launch the platform this summer, aiming for a July-ish date, a mid-July date. So yeah, that's where we're at, and we are venture funded with some great VCs in the LA area, and just kind of off and running. So thank you.
Awesome. So excited to have you here. Sharon, why don't we head over to you?
Hey guys, well, I am very excited to be on this panel with all of you awesome women and then everyone also in the crowd. So thank you for showing up and joining at 11 a.m. in the morning. I'm Sharon, the COO and co-founder of Esports One. For those of you who may or may not know what esports is, it's professional video gaming. And I'm actually born and raised in LA, so in Angelino, and I went to Carnegie Mellon University, studied industrial design, human-computer interaction, and robotics, and that kind of steered me on my way into entrepreneurship. And immediately out of school, I started my first company, and it still is, because it's still around and thriving, and called Hotpoint. And it is a media company that focused on CRM data and analytics for hospitality venues like hotels, restaurants, bars, clubs all over the world. So our clients range from everywhere, the entire Vegas Strip to Coachella, the music festival, to Live Nation, and then hotels in Singapore. So really all over the place as far as geographic audience. And from that platform, I built it into 2,500 clients worldwide, and then came into Esports One. And at Esports One, I've been a co-founder here for the past 2 years, and I actually joined a year into the founding of the company. And I helped kind of bring up what is now our fantasy platform. And at Esports One, we focus on data analytics as well in professional video gaming. And have built out a fantasy platform to be the first and only esports only fantasy gaming experience. So if you think about traditional sports like fantasy football or fantasy basketball and how popular those titles are, imagine now we're bringing that to League of Legends and to Fortnite and to Call of Duty, and giving an authentic, rich experience for our users with this platform.
Awesome. I'm going to have to tell my fiance about that. He's a big gamer. So Victoria, want to round us out here?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Tinsley, Head of Partnerships at Valence. Valence is a new tech platform and community that is specifically focused on connecting Black professionals with mentorship, career opportunities, and capital. And we are a new and thriving community of thousands of phenomenal Black leaders. And then we also do a lot of partnerships with community organizers and corporations as well that are, here to support what we're building. My background is definitely focused in the marketing world, but across a variety of industries. So started in the tech space, worked for active.com for 7 years in a variety of roles. And then after business school, I transitioned into the food and beverage industry, working at General Mills, doing a lot of product development, innovation, marketing strategy, things like that. I then transitioned into a VP of marketing and data insights role at AAA, and then made my way back to tech and when I joined the Valence team. So super excited to be here. I love the topic for the discussion today, and thank you for, obviously having all of us, especially thank you to dot.LA and Pledge LA for everything that they're doing to not only support everyone in LA, but specifically with a focus on diversity, inclusion, and belonging within the tech space. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like we've got a really great range of experiences from you ladies to dig into. So thanks for sharing a bit about yourselves. I would love to kick us off now in our discussion with some experience sharing. So there's lots of challenges that women struggle with, and not just those in industries like tech. On my end, as I've moved up in my career, it's been a battle to fight for things I'm passionate about, even when I'm the only woman in the room, to articulate my opinion strongly and be taken seriously in the face of some assumptions based on my gender. And I've had a lot of discussions with women in tech, specifically founders among them, about that running voice of self-censorship in our heads sometimes when it comes to self-assurance in the workplace. So I personally love to hear some of your experiences. It could be a specific story or more generally the trends and themes around obstacles you face. So Victoria, why don't we start with you? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, especially because I've moved into lots of different roles and lots of different companies throughout my career, I always tend to get those, kind of self-doubt butterflies whenever I'm stepping into something new. For better or for worse, it's a new experience. I'm not entirely sure what I'm getting myself into. And I think what I've been able to do to kind of combat that inner voice is certainly doing as much research and talking to as many people that have been in that role as possible before me, so that I can at least, absorb as much as their knowledge as possible. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? Because the longer you're doing something, the more comfortable you feel naturally. So that's certainly something that I've experienced, you know, in my own personal journey. I think a specific example that comes to mind is when I first started working at General Mills as, you know, a marketing manager there. I remember specifically being in one of those huge, you know, business review meetings. We had these huge monthly meetings forecasting out what do we need to produce, what do we need to make. And one of my male peers got up there and kind of did his spiel, gave his update. And I was floored. I was amazed by his confidence, you know, how he was presenting himself. The things that he was saying didn't seem overly profound to me by any means, but the room was eating it up. And afterwards, and we were, you know, good buddies. So I trusted his, you know, his candid, you know, feedback and whatnot. And so afterwards, I just asked him, like, how'd you do that, basically? And he was like, I just went up there and winged it, you know. And I was blown away, because for me, it's always been like preparation, go in with the data, make sure you have everything ready. And for him, he was like, I just decided I was going to go up there and just say what came to my heart, you know. And so from that point, it made me think, like, yes, of course, do what I need to do for what works for me, but also recognize that there is a level of confidence that trumps any data sometimes when, you know, when you're trying to command a room, or when you're, you know, having to sell a story to, you know, a group of different people. And so it was just a very eye-opening experience in terms of my personal journey and my process of being prepared for something versus seeing kind of what my male counterparts had done, or his lack of, you know, preparing for something when he was just up there winging it. So for me, it was very eye-opening.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something I've experienced before. And I've always been, even just sitting here now in a work from home world where, you know, my partner is a man, and I'm hearing how he is able to have that confidence. I'm like, my gosh, I need to step up my game here. But Sharon, Audra, would love to hear from you as well, whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, I can absolutely jump in. I think that everything Victoria said was so spot on, and I have personal experience. For me, you know, those butterflies have come about, especially when I joined the Esports 1 team. So I think that was kind of a pivotal moment for me. And I came in a year into the company being, you know, created, and they had the company started out of MIT and then moved out to LA, and that's when I joined them on their journey. And there was already a few people that are part of the team. And to come in as, you know, a COO and eventually become a co-founder as well, you know, how do you manage, you know, integrating yourself into a team of, which was all men and all male here, and coming in, you know, without the experience, they've already built, like, you know, the familial bond, like a family, you know, and they're all bonded. And then I'm coming in with the experience that I have, and how do I either bulldoze my way or integrate myself. And so that's kind of the balance I had to strike between the two. And it's tough. It's not easy. And, you know, as women, we sometimes like to be nurturing, or kind of, you know, sometimes maybe care about, will I not be liked? Am I going to set the wrong impression? And I'm like that as well. So I think for me, it really relied on being prepared. And I think for me, what really worked, and what worked best for me was not only asking people and kind of understanding what this company and what this role and what this world is all about for them, but also coming in with new insights. Because if I'm just absorbing from them what they know, why do they need me, right? So being able to do research in advance and come up with relevant insights or relevant new ideas after I already talked to the team, and then bring it back to the team and collaborating with them, then it's less of a hostile takeover. It's more like, all right, we're here on the same mission. You've told me what you know. I've put in the time, the work. I'm gaining your respect. Now, what do you guys think? Let's collaborate. This isn't my way or the highway. So that's kind of the approach that I've taken, and it's been rather successful. And, you know, with a team of all male in a male-dominated industry, that's really what helped me.
Yeah, that's so funny. So Sharon, I like completely agree with your approach, and it's funny that you said almost exactly what would come out of my mouth, but that's exactly it. Likewise, to Sharon, you know, I've been in tech my entire career. I've never reported to a woman. I very rarely had even women peers, and didn't have a lot of examples, right, to learn from. And where I kind of landed in being able to feel confident and be able to feel respected and like a contributor is to go deep on knowledge, right? So knowledge was my best defense, and especially in tech when knowledge is absolute, absolutely power. You really have to take the time to get to know your stuff. And when you know your stuff really well and you ask a lot of questions and you ask engineers why they're building something the way they're building it, and what if we did it another way, and you engage in a dialogue, and it's now two peers, two smart people interacting about it. Yeah. And like
collaboration.
And I have the confidence to do that because I take the time to study or, go deep on my subject matters. And I found that to be the most, by far, effective tool, because of course I made a lot of mistakes. I did try the come in the room and tell everyone what they're building and how they're going to build it, and walk out of the room and then have them all laugh at me and, do whatever they build it the way they wanted to build it, quite frankly. So it was a lot of years of just learning to take the time to dig in, to create dialogue with everyone else in the room, and to really understand their thinking process and what they think the product should have, why they think, what's important to them. And then, on the other side of that is always coming back to the people that are building, the engineers that are building things that, that I'm managing, telling them what's happening with their product. Hey, remember that thing we shipped last week? Well, this is what happened, and our engagement numbers went up by X. Or like, oh, that thing you were kind of fighting me on? Well, like, you were right, kind of failed. We're going to have to sunset it. Like, you know what I mean? So just really creating those relationships and that trust, and then making sure that they know that your stuff is like the biggest confidence builder for me. And I can't say, and again, we probably come from very similar roles, Sharon. So it's like that seems to work.
I absolutely agree. And I think on that topic also, one last thing I'd add is a resume can only get you so far to a team that you're managing. They don't care. I'm a little less, they don't really care. If I made 2,500, partnerships in my previous company, they don't care. Like that seems more arrogant. Like, put your money where your mouth is. Like, let's put the resume aside. You got the job, right? You're here. Now what can we do with it? Let's not focus on what you've done in the past. Like, show me what you can do here. And that collaboration, and actually, like you said, pointing out when you've maybe were incorrect, or when you had a good idea and pushing forward, but as long as there's clarity and everyone's moving in a direction, and you got to move together. Can't be,
right.
You can't go against each other.
Right. And so
I was just going to say, you made an interesting point about, speaking up when you've made a mistake or when you've done something wrong. Because we're human. I think that happens to everyone. I'd love to get into the fact that from my experience, I have certainly seen more women going back and saying, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This is my bad, versus my male counterparts. And since we're talking about, that dynamic, of course, in terms of reassurance and their confidence versus our confidence, I personally think it's, you're able to build better products and better relationships with your teams when you do that, when you can say, like, that's why we have all these postmortems to reflect and learn from our mistakes. I've just noticed, especially in the tech space, that it doesn't tend to necessarily come from the men initially.
I think that's one of our superpowers as women, truthfully. Yeah. I really do. I think that men, there are exceptions to this, but there are a lot of men you see, like, sometimes like some ego come into play, or people are, want to show, like, they're afraid to admit that they are wrong or whatnot. I think you see it more often with women, where we can acknowledge and keep moving. And I think it doesn't create that sort of a conflict or like a barrier, or we don't have to spend 15 minutes arguing it. Like, all right, didn't work. Let's
keep it moving.
Work to your strengths, right? Like, we're women. Hell yeah. Like, yeah, let's not fight it.
Yeah. And then the other piece of that is, it's like, okay, when you rely a little too heavily on knowing a lot and feeling confident in your knowledge, I've found that when I get nervous and when I feel vulnerable is when I'm coming into a new role. I've spent most of my career in the same role, and then coming into, being in CEO role now with Vurbl, I found some really awkward times, like just emotionally, like admitting that I need someone to walk me through this contract, or like, I'm fundraising now, and this is a whole different world than I've ever been in. And so a big learning for me over the past several months has been like, okay, don't be afraid to ask a question. Even if you're sure that it's stupid, ask the question. Just make sure you frame up that, hey, maybe you told me this before, maybe I should know this, but I really need you to walk me through this thing. Or, you know, dealing with finance. Finance hasn't been, you know, what I've been working in for years and years, and now having to really understand strategic finance and things like that is a whole new world. So now I'm learning to be a kind of on the other side of just like question asking, you know, I no longer can answer all the questions for everyone. I have to be the, you know, I need a lot of help and support around me. And so that's been a really big, scary leap in some ways, which may sound a little silly, but like, it's like, I definitely realized, oh, I built all my confidence on something that isn't always going to exist. So I better find some new tools, you know, so.
Yeah, I really like the specifics that you guys are going into, and thank you, Victoria, for bringing that piece up. I think that's an interesting observation. I love to dig a little deeper here, right? Okay, so I love the idea of let's ask questions. Let's not be afraid to admit when you don't know something, or admit when, you know, hey, this wasn't the right approach. You were right. Are there specific things that you can do though around language and how you do that? Because sometimes I think women struggle with taking that approach, but coming in and saying, you know, I don't know this, I want to get your help, can oftentimes be perceived as, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about, why is she here? Or we often come off as apologizing too much when we weren't right about something. And kind of how do you balance that dynamic and do it successfully?
That's a tough one.
Audra, we were after you.
Yeah. Again, I would go back to, I think framing is really important, saying like, hey, I understand what this is, but there's a couple points I need to dig in on. And trust me, I've been on the other side of like a lot of eye rolls, like just generally, just my entire career. And so I try to do a lot to avoid the eye rolls, but yeah, it's really, I think just understanding frameworks is really important. So even if you don't know the specifics, but if you come in not understanding anything about what you're talking about, it sounds a little unprepared, and it's hard to respect that, especially I think as like from a more male energy, you know. So, you know, they're not as like Sharon was saying, they maybe not as nurturing and like, you know, trying to make me feel comfortable, you know. So I come in really like making sure they understand that I know the framework and that I have very specific, well thought out questions. I think that's the best way to show that you don't know something without, you know, looking like you haven't done your homework kind of thing. So I don't know if you guys have
I guess I'm just going to back that up. So with us here and with me specifically, I think what's been able to tangibly help me gain that respect in any team I'm at, and even with a partner or whatnot, is knowing the data and knowing the stats behind it. So if you're coming into a meeting, whether it's just with someone that you, just with your internal team or with someone in like a greater partner or whatnot, coming in knowing your stats or saying, hey guys, you know, our user base is 18 to 25 and, you know, they're 58% of them are on their phones. Let's build mobile. Right, so coming in, even with just that bare minimum of, I do a little bit more than bare minimum, I'll tell you that much, it'll be more effective, but you know, that minimal research that others may have not walked into a meeting to talk about whatever needs to talk about in the meeting. But if you come prepared, they can argue you all day, but you have the numbers and you have the stats and they won't. That's the best. So if you're non-confrontational or you don't like to engage in a public argument, maybe sometimes, I'll be honest, that's not my favorite. It really isn't my favorite, whether it's in my personal relationships or in work. I really don't like getting in like public standoffs. But coming in with the data and kind of saying like, here are the facts, right? Like let's draw these conclusions from the facts. I've already drawn my conclusions. Do you have the data in front of you? Can you debate this with data, or is it just an opinion? And at that point, A, you gain more respect, and then B, you can actually get your ideas across without having to be apologetic or without having to figure out how to phrase it. It gives you more power in that way.
Yeah, that's really, I wholeheartedly agree. It's a great approach.
Yeah, I think along the lines of having a framework and obviously having the data to back it up, Audra, you made a point of, you know, making sure you're prepared with specific questions, which I think is so spot on. And then also thinking about what can you do to help that person help you, right? Like you have so much to offer. You may not be an expert in that one space, but you're there for a reason. You're contributing to the greater, you know, good of the company. And so being able to make sure that you are sharing what you're bringing and what you're offering, so that it's not just a one-way street of, I need you to tell me all of this so that I can be better for myself, but help me help you. I'm here to offer whatever talent I have to offer. Has certainly helped on my end.
Yeah. And definitely the people I've seen get marginalized the most, it's so sad. You see a lot of people just, especially in tech, I've seen a lot of women's opinions get just their roles, their contributions get really marginalized and downplayed. And I think the biggest consistent attribute I see in the women that I see get so marginalized is that they may know their stuff, but they're not making it obvious enough that they've done, the research around it. And so, yes, again, just to creating having the knowledge to support the story you're telling, or the task you're advocating for or whatnot is the most empowering thing I think you can do, just generally as a female in a male dominated environment.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting, point that you made, Victoria, about what value, are you going to bring to them? I've certainly been in many situations, I recently started a new job thinking about, well, what can I bring for this person? How am I going to help them, rather than just making it all about me? What are they going to give for me? And, definitely in my previous life as an M&A person, the data, Sharon, Audra, 100%. No one could argue against that.
Yeah.
So Audra, something that you said, I'd love to expand a little bit on, is about, kind of this aspect around delivery and perception, that sometimes women have the knowledge and they have that information, but they aren't necessarily making it known. And so I'd love to talk about this theme of perception and how best to make that known, to make that knowledge clear without coming off as arrogant and a know-it-all and aggressive. Because sometimes, obviously, when females do that, we can be called, unflattering names like bitches or different things like that. Whereas, in Victoria, the story that you shared, when men do it, it's, wow, how impressive, how confident. So I'd love to get your ideas on how we can best manage that delivery.
Well, one thing is I see a huge difference in women being willing to take, take the, I guess the appreciation or take the credit for something that they've been a big contributor on, versus men. It's amazing how many times I've seen, a team sitting at a table collaborated on shipping or building something great, and so the male might say, "Oh, I built this. This was my, this is my thing. I did." And then sometimes you're kind of like, "Okay, yeah, sure, okay." And then you don't want to say, "Well, we all did it. We all built it together," because then it's like, "Oh, well, do I just look like I'm trying to ride on the coattails or something?" So I think women being more willing to say or just speak up first about how we did this as a team, or I did this even, I can take credit for this every now and then. This was my initiative that I pushed through, and it just to every now and then, you have to sometimes point out your wins and your contributions. Sometimes people won't see them unless you point them out, and men are really good at pointing them out for themselves, and women are really bad at pointing them out for themselves. And again, I think it's because, Kelly, you're saying, we don't want to seem like we're, whatever, overly confident or trying to, whatever, steal other people's credit or whatever. So I don't know. And I don't really know, the answer to, I think every context, every situation is a little different, but I think just being more willing to take credit for the wins, and even Sharon maybe presenting data, look, this thing that, in the weekly meeting, it worked, everybody, look at my numbers or something, just feeling empowered to take a little credit sometimes, I think would go a long way in terms of, letting let's say that's a lot about managing up too, letting the leadership know that, look, you're also moving the needle. It's not just the people that are raising their hand saying they did it all. So, or the men that might say they did it all or whatever.
I think building on that, just thinking about teams that I've led in the past as well. So I've led, larger teams which have been predominantly male, but with, sprinkling of women in there as well. And to your points, men typically feel very comfortable taking credit and patting themselves on the back. And, you got to be your own best cheerleader. So when I'm thinking about the teams that I've led and the dynamics in that sense, being able to facilitate a way for everyone to almost toot their own horn so that it's not so awkward or uncomfortable for a male or a female who may not be comfortable with that, but it's like, we're all doing it. We're all going to say our good thing that we did this week, and we're going to say the thing that we're struggling with this week. So then it's like, it's out there. You don't have to worry about, this one guy that keeps saying the same thing about every single time he wants to toot his own horn. But that seemed to help to at least start to facilitate that behavior, and naturally it starts to happen on its own. But to be able to kind of create that safe space of like, we're all going to talk about the awesome work that we're doing as individuals and how it's contributing to the team, definitely has helped when I've led larger teams.
I think also something that we do at Esports One is every morning we have our daily stand-ups, and we have our project manager run it every day. And I've been really blessed that the team has been absolutely wonderful, and there really isn't that much of a divide in this team, even though it's all male dominated. But his name is Nick, and what Nick does every morning in our stand-up is he goes around and goes through our project management tool and checks in on everyone and like what we're working on and what we're doing, whether we're working remote or in person. We do it every morning. And we'll all celebrate each other's like small wins, right? Like we check something off of our checklist, like, oh, awesome, can't wait. Like, can you show me? And so there's a lot of like show and tell that happens, and it only lasts 30 minutes, this meeting. And it's a 16-person team and 16 full-time. And we have a bunch more contractors that join this group meeting every day. But being able to acknowledge people or acknowledge each other on a level playing field and kind of giving an opportunity to do so, I think that has been, that it changes the dynamic of how to talk about wins and losses, and how to collaborate about it. So I think that having that as a structured time has been actually really helpful and instrumental in our company.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We have our stand-ups every morning here at dot.LA, and that's also something, when someone has a great event, a great story, we do that as well. And I think you're right, it allows people the space to talk about that, and also for everyone on the team to see the value that person is creating, man or woman. So we've had a couple of questions come through that are talking a little bit more thematically about specific interactions between men and women in the workplace. And so I'd love to thematize this for a second. Sorry, the consultant in me. So, we've seen a lot of movements like Me Too and Time's Up start to bring to the forefront some of these dynamics and these interactions between men and women in the workplace. And they've done a lot to do that, a lot of good, but they've also, I think at some point, started to alienate men, to make it tough for folks to feel comfortable sharing their opinions. And so one question that we had come through from an anonymous attendee said, have you ever had a male in the workplace that has actively worked against you in a situation? And what did you do to improve the situation? So I'd love to hear if anyone has any thoughts, or maybe just has seen something that they've seen worked before.
I have things that haven't worked, but I'm like,
okay too.
thinking about that. No, I mean, look, the sad truth is that, that happens. That happens a lot. It used to happen more. I think Me Too has dramatically changed the tone in the workplace generally. And I've enjoyed watching that. But the reality is sometimes, you have to know when to check out, and you get pushed out. You know what I mean? So, and you need to protect yourself. Some people suffer through things a little too long. And so I think there's like a balance of like, there are tools you can use sometimes to improve and fight things, but sometimes you also have to protect yourself and feel empowered enough to leave a bad situation. So, that's like the worst case scenario kind of thing. But on the other side, it's like, the only other thing that, I've seen kind of mildly work is, being self-aware enough to know what's going on around you, and then trying to build consensus to build a case for your point of view. And that's, otherwise it's like he said, she said kind of stuff. And that usually comes down to who has a better relationship with the people in power. So, you got to build a team, build consent, build support, build alliances. It sounds political, but it's like, doesn't have to be political. It's just, you know, making sure you have people around you that know the truth and you know, things like that. So
watch a lot of Survivor.
All right. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, but yeah, like sometimes the answer is just to know, what is it? Know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away. I would have to say that applies sometimes in the workplace, but yeah.
I would add to that and say, if you want to fight, one of my closest friends, she's been having some, like, issues that are kind of described by this question at work. And she has a manager that keeps trying to push her out or doesn't like her, or, you know, it seems like it's personal at this point. And we talk a lot. We like to brainstorm. I kind of give her my feedback as being someone, you know, who's maybe more in a manager position or kind of a higher up. And she has to work for a guy like this. And what she's done, which I think is really interesting, and she's actually pretty successful, like, kudos to her. She took, again, I'm maybe I'm the data queen, I don't know, but she's very organized, and she took note of every time that once she understood she was going to be put into a review by the manager's manager, she put together documentation. She spent the whole weekend putting together every dollar, every penny she saved the company and what she's done in the past year and why she thinks she deserves not only to be there, but also get a raise. And she did. She got that raise. And this just happened a month ago. And so she actually he came in much less prepared, this manager. So there's her, the manager, and the manager's manager. And they came to talk to the higher up, the head of management, and her personal manager came in much less prepared, although he came in with a lot to fire at her with. And she came with a written list that she submitted in advance. And the head manager saw them duel it out. And at the end of the day, her data really showcased, and there was a lot to prove for her case. So that's a good way, also in a non-confrontational way, to kind of go around and say, hey, listen, like, here are just the numbers for you to be aware of walking into this meeting, without being incriminating or kind of pointing someone out for any sort of ill practice.
Yeah, I think that list making is really important. And quite frankly, I had situations in the past where I was encouraged to keep lists about things that were happening around me. And, you know, in one case in particular, I can remember too busy. We were in launching. I was like, how do I have time to document like all of this other stuff in addition to like doing my job? I probably could have found the time, and I, you know, regret not doing those kinds of things, but it's great advice for anyone dealing with any kind of hostility or even marginalization. These things are so incremental sometimes. They're so nuanced what happens sometimes, that on a singular event, it's not a big deal, but when there's 20 of them together, it becomes kind of, you know, systematic or you know, kind of a consistent uncomfortable situation. And if the lists can, you know, the logging of that can be very powerful. That would be great advice for anyone that's experiencing hostility or you know, unfair treatment.
I can't talk from personal experience, but I don't know if Victoria has I don't know if you have any insight as to any.
I know, I was trying to think of a specific example of a male colleague who is active.
It could be even a female, right? Because I feel like we've all seen like female on female bullying.
That's true. I do have.
Yeah, right.
A lot of those stories. I'm not gonna lie.
More vicious.
which is really, really unfortunate, because I've been in situations where it's been me and only one other female. And for some reason, it becomes competitive instead of collaborative. And I know you guys have probably experienced the same thing, but I think for me, it's certainly been, you know, trying to just understand like where that's coming from. And again, like trying to have allies around you, trying to make sure that people know, you know, the great work that you're doing, but then also letting people know, like, I'm not a threat to you. Like, I'm here to do great things, just like you're here to do great things. But yeah, I've certainly been in situations where I've had to have super frank and, you know, direct conversations of, this is impacting the way, you know, we work together and, you know, my ability to do what I'm supposed to do. And frankly, my like will to want to work here much longer. So we've got to either come up with something, or this isn't, you know, sustainable long term. And so just being able to, you know, understand, like, if you're starting to feel that like kind of microaggression or passive aggressiveness or whatever it might be, to really like nip it in the bud as soon as you're feeling it, because it doesn't necessarily go away on its own automatically. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It has been unfortunate, but I have experienced that in terms of having a few female bosses, that it just, there's a competitive nature there sometimes.
Yeah, I appreciate, Sharon, that you brought that up, that even a female, right? Because that happens all the time. And it's unfortunate, because that also starts to bring up perceptions and reinforce assumptions that men make about, you know, females, women, when we start to interact with each other that way. But something that I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper is, you know, this idea of when do you start to raise these things, right? So Victoria, you mentioned, you know, nip it in the bud. And Sharon, Audra, we were also talking about making lists and kind of seeing, okay, it's never something huge, right, that happens. Because when it's something big, you're going to say, okay, I need to raise this. But it's these little things that you start to wonder, oh, was that on purpose? Was it not on purpose? Kind of, what's the point? What's the tipping point for you ladies? And it's, of course, situation based, where you say, okay, maybe I need to start dealing with something here, rather than letting it slip under the rug. You know, because you don't want to look like you're complaining too much too. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
I think for me and my own kind of personal compass, if it's still on my mind and on my heart 2 days later, then it's not going to go away. Like, there's some things you brush off and you're like, all right, I'm keeping it moving, and, you know, that wasn't a big deal. But if a couple of days down the road, it's still kind of gnawing at me, either because I did something or something happened to me, then I try to address it right then and there, certainly. I think what's interesting, and, you know, just looking at some of the chats, is I think in a dynamic where you're in a company that's large enough to raise something, that's very different than if you're a 3-person team or a 2-person team, you know? So it's not necessarily there's an HR person to raise it to, or a manager of a manager to raise it to. You may be a flat organization with 3 people, and you've got to figure that out. And so for me, just being able to kind of address it as early as possible has been beneficial for me.
Yeah. I would put a somewhat positive spin on this, like a hopeful spin on this as well. I think that more from a management position, you know, if you are out there in a management position, kind of like what they say about like men or men and their moms kind of thing, right? Like, who raised them and who taught them, you know, how to treat a woman or whatnot. You're their moms, kind of, right? Like, you can teach them how to participate in a team. And if it's not there, like, I think it's up to you to really see that. Don't let people be, you know, victimized down below, whether it's man to man, because I've seen that before, or it's, you know, woman on woman being like, you know, bees to each other, or, you know, man to woman. It doesn't matter. And I've seen kind of not in our companies. I mean, I'm the only management that's a woman, but in other companies that, you know, like leading women are bullying, you know, like other men. So really set the standard for that and show that that's not tolerated. And you can really make a huge impact for any future company they work at. And I think that's super important, to just keep in mind that you're empowered to do that as well.
Yeah. And also, on that note, just calling people out. I've noticed, and again, this has gotten better over the years, but like, some of the things men will say, you know, and with completely unaware that it is it's so offensive or so inappropriate, like, is kind of astounding to me. So I think getting in the habit of maybe not publicly calling them out, but always taking them aside and being like, hey, that thing you said might not have been, like, you know, perceived like the way you wanted it to be. So let's talk about how you might have said that differently or more productively or whatnot. So yeah, it's that constant training is very helpful.
I think, to Sharon's point, on a positive note as well, when I've had people have my back or kind of step in and, you know, speak up for me or whatever it might be, also acknowledging that person as an ally, whether they're male, female, whatever, is like, you know, thank you, either publicly or privately, whatever makes sense for the relationship. But I do think in terms of this kind of like over censorship and people not feeling entirely comfortable and speaking up about certain things because of, Time's Up and Me Too and everything else, right, that we're talking about. I have found it to be very refreshing when, one of my male counterparts would speak up about something, and I want to make sure that I give that the acknowledgement that it deserves, so that it's kind of that positive, reinforcement, like, that was awesome that you did that. Like, I would love it, for that to happen again. And so I want to make sure that I'm also providing that positive feedback when it does happen, even if it's rare. Sometimes it happens, and it's great when it does.
Yeah, and I'm sure also, showing that you'll be there for that person too, in a similar manner, when they need to lean on you. So going back to that point of how do you provide value? So for the remaining 15 minutes, I'd love to complicate this issue with the fact that we are working in a virtual world, and having those conversations and those authentic interactions is just so tough, right? If you have a great Zoom camera, you can see my body language and how I'm feeling about things, but a lot of stuff is happening over audio, a lot of stuff is happening over Slack. And so one of the questions that I'd love to think about in this context that came through from one of our viewers is, how do you at each of your companies effectively encourage communication and dealing with some of these issues, and then especially now in a virtual world?
Yeah, go ahead, Audra, or whoever wanted to.
I know. So just generally, like, the way we're handling, I think I mentioned earlier, maybe yesterday, to the group, that something you lose a lot of when you're on a camera all the time is all of the kind of banter and relationship building, and the things that really make teams kind of coalesce, and trust building. And that's a lot of that's on the side, right? It happens when you're in the hallway, or whatever, sitting next to each other in the office, or in the lunch area, or whatever. So so the way I've tried to keep my team just kind of connected and on more than just a professional level, but creating real friendship and relationship, is to, one, enforce, these daily stand-ups are really important to us, to all see each other's face every day, talk about what we're doing, go through any problems, blockers, like, just being a real, like we're all in the same room for one point in the day all together. And then we also leave open a virtual room that's meant to be like a kind of like an open office door. And so it's open all day. I try to be on there as much as I can, and people can pop in and out, and you can Slack someone, hey, can you jump in the virtual room? I want to ask you something really quick, or I want to show you something really quick. And so we're trying to create this virtual open office concept. But it's we're getting there. I think the team's been doing a great job, and we're a small team. We're only 10 people right now. So it's not as challenging as like a multi 100 or 1,000 person company, but that's just one tactic we've tried, and I think it's been fairly effective. Just giving people time to have the side chats and some of the banter, and take a couple more minutes in a meeting to let people talk about what's happening in their house, or about their dog, or it's like, we tend to be in the office when at least I am, let's be as efficient as possible. When we're in the meeting room, we get through the agenda and we have our action items, and let's go. Because you're talking outside of the meeting, but we don't have that anymore. So maybe your meetings aren't as formal as they used to be as well. So.
Yeah, and I would say, I think at Esports One, we're in a really unique situation maybe right now. We have our product launching. We have a launch happening June 1st. So everything leading up, everything with Corona or COVID happening and all that, like, that was in the heat of us, planning what our product launch or our next season launch. My apologies, we're already launched and out there, but we have a new season of fantasy that starts that launches June 1st, and then June 12th, kind of like the season opens. And what does that look like to have the whole team come together? We have different time zones and all that, and actually drive and make this product just as good or even better than it was if we were all sitting together collaborating in an office. So like Audra said, you don't have that sort of like immediate brainstorms, like, we have a problem, we didn't think about this in advance, let's whiteboard this. Like, that's been really difficult. And also, when you're thinking of building product, the new ideas, like, you want to be the best, you want to be cutting edge. Like, you're not just seeing what other people are doing and let's like replicate and copy. Like everything that we do is something that we've kind of thought up internally, and those not having those whiteboard sessions is probably the hardest hurdle that we've had, the most difficult part that we've had. So I'd say on that front, screen share has been our best friend. So opposite to what Audra said, and again, to each person it works differently. Like everyone has their own ways it will work for them. For us, it's, you know, I'm always telling people, screen share with me. I don't care if you're reading a list off to me and it's already in our CRM or already in our project management system or in Slack or whatnot. Just show me the list, just to make sure everyone's on the same page and reading the exact same item together. That's been really helpful. And on Slack, when you screen share, you can actually write on the screen. And that's been really helpful, oddly enough. That's like the one tool I couldn't live without maybe right now during Corona. So that's one thing. And just really fast to touch on another kind of like angle of this question is, some of you guys might be interviewing right now, and it's not all about the company you're just at and making sure that that's effective and you do your job effectively. It's like, what if you're trying to make a new impression, get a new partner, a new interview or whatnot? And I'd say for that, it just show up, dress the part. You know, you can tell even just from how we're all dressed, not to call everyone out, but we're all dressed very differently. And it's maybe more so to our industry, right? I'm in gaming, I'm in the t-shirt, but then we have media over there and it's a different, when I was in hospitality, I wore something very different. So dress the part and really kind of, I think that goes a long way. And I think any sort of screen share you can show to showcase more about yourself as well and your work, that'd be really helpful when you're interviewing. And I'm trying to like, I think this could be a bigger topic, right? About how you negotiate over Zoom or like remotely. But I think these are some questions that have been brought to my attention by friends or people that I advise as well. On like, how do I overcome this interviewing process? Just a little bit kind of on that angle for anyone out there who's looking to get a new job. One last thing that I'd love to call out, last thing on the job interviewing thing, I would say if you want to really have your mind blown, in esports recently, a few months ago, there was a kid, a college student who applied for an internship for 100 Thieves. And if you look up 100 Thieves interview video internship, it is probably the most unique way I've seen someone apply for a job, and it went absolutely viral. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. And I think that happened before COVID started, but that actually is probably the best use or kind of application format you could be doing right now. Really, like, just go see that video and get ideas on how to be different and set yourself apart when you can't do it in person. So.
Yeah, and then on the Valence front, we've been just taking the time, like Audra said, take the time and let people kind of vent if they need to, talk about what's going on in their world. We definitely kind of hit a like video fatigue point where we're like, you don't got to turn your camera on. If you don't want to show, you haven't done your hair, whatever else, that's fine. Like, come as you are, or don't show your face, whatever you want to do. I think just extending upon that as well, of like, if text is better than Slack, than email or whatever, like kind of letting people like communicate and contribute through whatever channel works best for them has been super helpful, just as everyone's, kind of in different places of the country, different, places with their family, being impacted by all of this. So that certainly helped. And then of course, virtual happy hours and things like that to still kind of bring the team together have been huge. So that's been the fun part of that, of just being able to kind of get to have a sneak peek of people's homes and things like that, but also being able to still connect as a community and as a team.
Yeah, everything that you ladies just said resonated with me. So for example, I actually started my new job remote. So I've never met my coworkers in person, never had that moment to go grab a coffee with someone, to ask about, their dog or whatever. And so that has been a struggle of trying to build those relationships that do facilitate working on a project together, more easily. You understand where someone's coming from because their background, different things about them, you can connect with them. So one question that came through from an audience member that I think is actually kind of interesting to think about for both a pre-COVID, but also COVID world. So have any of you been in an all-male team or company? We obviously know, Sharon, that you've been in that situation before. How do you deal with delegating work and not looking bossy? So, I'd take that question, but also broaden it. How are you doing this too in a COVID world when it is hard to sometimes convey tone if a lot of stuff is coming over email or Slack, et cetera?
For me, I've stopped caring so much about my tone. Maybe I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but at the end of the day, work needs to get done. And if you know what you want, just be very clear. And if you don't know what you want, then be clear about that too. Hey, this is the feeling I'm getting. Can you help me understand like how to translate that? But be assertive and be clear. Don't worry about coming off kind of in a bad tone. Just don't be insensitive, I'd say. I'm very assertive on that front. I would think that works for me.
Yeah, that's
Right.
that's kind of like where I landed too. It's like the less I cared, the more like about tone and like what people thought of me. Like it's almost, the more effective I could be, because you just shut down all the personal feelings that result in people's perceptions, and then you just let the product speak for itself, right? You're shipping product at the end of the day. And if that's coming out okay, and it's, on time, maybe not on time, but like close to on time, and it's good product, and you're running the team well, then maybe you just sometimes you have to let the bossy label kind of roll off your back kind of thing. Yeah. But that comes with, I think, age and experience too. You just, over time, you care less and less about, those kinds of things, but
you start to build that thicker skin. I was going to say, I'd love to move away from the bossy stigma, right? Like if you are a boss, you have to delegate, whether you have an all-female team or an all-male team or whatever it might be. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's more so making sure that the team that you are delegating to understands the importance of the work and how it's contributing and whatnot, so that they feel like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This is why I should, get involved with this right away. As opposed to it being like, oh, here comes another project down the, right? Like they need to feel that sense of urgency and how it's important. But I mean, if you're a boss, then you gotta do the work, delegate. Comes with the territory.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a really good, a little soundbite to wrap up on. If you're a boss, you got to do the work, you got to do the delegation. So listen, we are almost at time in our discussion, but I'd love if any of you ladies have any final thoughts that you want to share, speak now.
I guess the only thing that I wanted to add is, when we were thinking about this theme, was to not assume that all women are not confident or have these doubts, right? There are some phenomenal women out there that are crushing it across the board, like everyone involved in this conversation. And so lean on them, right? Like model what they're doing. If you see someone that's showing up in a phenomenal way, ask them questions, figure out how they got there, because I don't want to set a tone of like all women are, are scared or fragile or don't know how to be confident in the workplace, because that's totally not true. I know we all have these moments, but I'd say, some of the most confident and successful people that I know in my life are women, and they're leaders and they're badass in their own right? So I just want to make sure that we're not leaving the audience thinking that and flowers or anything like that, because that's not the case.
In that same light, I'd say also same thing about certain men, or I'd say men in general, right? They're not bad guys. They don't, there's nothing here that, that has like ached. There's certain scenarios in which, we all mishandle ourselves, and there should be weight brought to it. But also there's a lot of men out there that we work with every day, and I'm sure Victoria and Audra and Kelly as well. And we wouldn't be where we are without them. And in a way that, they've lifted us up and they've helped us and they're supportive, and we feel like we can turn to them to collaborate and work together. So some of the best people I've ever worked with are both male and female. And so keep that in mind.
Yeah, I want to echo that, because it may sound like, we talked a lot about men not behaving on this call, but in fact, it's absolutely true. My biggest champions in my career have all been men, and I have a whole crew of great supporters, that are male, and obviously very, very thankful and grateful for them. But also just like my last thing that I always try to enforce in all of, the people that I mentor is like, there is no better confidence building tool than deeply understanding the domain that you're operating in. And taking the time to do that, even if it's nights and weekends, is probably one of the best things you can do to excel in your career and build your confidence. So if you're understand your business domain, understand how it works, understand how the money flows, understand the data, like there's nothing, understand the technology even. So I think those are, that's just putting the burden on yourself. Don't look at other people to lift you up. That knowledge is going to lift you up. So.
Yeah, I think that is a great note to end on, and a really important thing to think of, because I mean, you're right. Men have to want to lift us up and to be engaging them in those conversations in a really productive way and having that perspective rather than maybe some of the alienating ways that we've seen some of the women do. So I wholeheartedly support. I'm here because I had amazing men supporting me and women, and so it's important to remember that. So listen, ladies, thank you so much. I really appreciate how honest and vulnerable you've been in sharing your experiences for myself and everyone on the call here. So thank you for your time, and thank you to our audience. If you want more from us at dot.LA, we run strategy sessions every Tuesday. We've got one with Hello Office coming up next week. And we also have a virtual pitch showcase next Thursday on real estate tech. So if you're interested in either of those events, sign up. Follow us on social media for our video content and sign up for our newsletter. I got to do my plugs every time, guys. And so anyhow, that is it from me. Thank you again to our wonderful speakers. I really enjoyed this discussion today.